Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation. This is going to be about how, in my own context, I did analysis, specifically opposition analysis, and then also how that is able to then form an offensive game plan. So as you can see, as I said, offensive. So my main responsibilities during RUA when it came to analysis and game model was our offensive side of things. So essentially, we worked sort of opposite. So if I was working, as I said, on the offensive, then I would analyze opposition teams on the defensive side of things. So yeah, a few people have been asking about some methods, how I do things. So just wanted to give a little bit of insight into into how I worked. So yeah, essentially this is a presentation that I would show to the players. All of the videos, all of the slides is what the players would have been presented at the time. And then yeah, just for you guys to really have a little think about how it could look in your own context and maybe a little bit thought provoking in terms of how if you have game plans or you have game models or you are use an analysis in your day-to-day work, session work, how you might be able to then go and deliver that. So yeah, just to give you a little context. I worked for a club called Rua as a assistant head coach for the first team. We played in Top Serien, which is the highest professional league in women's football in Norway. I've taken one of our analysis and game plans against Rosenborg. I'm sure many of you will know Rosenborg and have heard of them, arguably the biggest club in Norway. On the women's side, at the time that we played this match, they were third. They played in the Europa League equivalent on the women's side. Um, and yeah, we was second bottom at the time in a relegation playoff. So it was quite a big gap in terms of how the table looked. So yeah, just to give you a bit of insight into how we presented this information and the plan that we had going into it. I've also taken a couple of clips um, from the game itself, just to give you a little bit of insight into how that looked on the field as well. So yeah, what we do or what we did when we was analyzing teams is we was very specific in the fact that we didn't want to overload players with so many clips or so many analysis because you've heard the saying paralysis by analysis. What we didn't want to do is present, 20 clips or be in a room for 45 minutes doing analysis. We tried to keep it as short as possible, but as long as it needed to be to get all of the key information's in there. So, from my side of things, it was okay. Well, what is really important to us when we're analysing how an opposition defends? So we sort of narrowed it down that we wanted to take how they pressed us from a goal kick. We also took how they looked in a high block or a open play high press, a mid block and a low block. And essentially, we'd maybe take one, maximum two clips from each phase, just as much sort of informational clips as we felt was needed. And then for myself, as I was working through it through the week, often I'd have 25 clips that I had to sort of narrow down into five of the best ones. So yeah, that's what we tried to do. And then the head coach was mainly responsible for the defending side. So then he would be showing clips of the opposition in attack, and then we had our other assistant that was responsible for the set pieces. How we tried to do it was that we had everything sort of attacking and defending in terms of a game plan on a Thursday if we was leading into a Saturday game, and then we'd have a little bit more of a focus on the Friday, the day before the match, which is quite common, I think, on a match day -1, just to take the tempo down, the intensity a bit low, just to get ready to go into the match day on the Saturday. So yeah, this is what we're going to be focusing on is the red team here. So we've got Rosenborg that's defending in a 4-3-3 high press. As you can see, it looks quite nice on the field. So this is something that I was a big advocate for in terms of being able to use telestrations for the players. Um, I felt the software that we used was Huddle Studio, a really good bit of software that's very linked to sports code. Um, And yeah, I just found it really good for different types of learners in the room. You know, some players really responded to just seeing the clip as it was. Some responded just to words, but others really like to visualize things in front of them. So I was a really big advocate for us starting to use this form of telestration. It without lying, it would add time into the week. It probably took an extra 45 to minutes to an hour, but really positive feedback from the players as well. And just being able to look through the room, I felt that players were a lot more engaged when they had something like this in front of them. And on the other side of that as well is that I was obviously presenting in English um, to players, which is obviously their second language. And you had a range from players that was exceptional in English to some that was maybe not as confident in English. So just to have this really sort of mitigated that side of things as well. So it's very clear in front of them. As you can see from Rosenborg now, if we just go into it, they had a really narrow front three. So essentially, the striker and the two wings would be extremely narrow on this first pass to try and prevent passes going into the middle. And then you'll be able to see that the outside centre mids, as they are here, are very wide, and the number six held that sort of middle space as well. So it's something quite sort of interesting. Um, that we knew that they were going to do by that point. They were very structured in the way that they did things, very consistent. So by the third time that we played them, as this game was, we had a really good idea of actually how they were gonna do things. And as you can see here, looking to lock off to one side, and then just another key thing, which wasn't actually so was maybe a little bit different to the first two games we played. They were very happy to step out with one in their back line, so you can just see how that affected their structure in the back line here when they had a centre back as it was here, ready to step out to take this number 10, for example. Yeah, and that was what we would just show for the high press, just the main sort of things that was very important. So narrow front three, quite wide midfield three, and the fact that they were happy to step out with one in the back line and potentially where the spaces might actually come up in practice. So just with that, this is what we'd show the players. This would be our game plan, so to speak. I'm going to show you a lot of slides, but essentially, when it comes to planning sort of a game plan, if you like, 80% of it is your own principles and game model things that you've been working on throughout the whole season. 20% of it is adapting to the opposition. So a lot of these slides players would see week in, week out. Good to have a little refresher once a week. We'd run through it as quick as we needed to. Um, and yeah, we would really highlight the things that was maybe a little bit different game by game. So this is what we decided to do in terms of a structure. More often than not, we would line up in a 1-3-4-2-1, as you can see here with our midfield box. Sometimes we would line up in a 1-3-5-2. For this game, we decided to go with the box just so we create that extra player in the midfield. And then a really big sort of key thing, a little bit sort of probably more positional play oriented, is that we wanted to try and create those overloads and use in spaces that we knew would give us those overloads. So, for example, we had the setup that we wanted the goalkeeper to be our +1 on the first line of pressure, as you can see here, um, where we create that 4 versus 3. And then essentially, we wanted to play to the goalkeeper. What you might see now is that goalkeepers would be receiving the ball into the middle of the goal. We was actually okay with the goalkeeper being a little bit off the post. And then people will say, well, that makes it really easy for you to get locked off to a side. Yes, it does, but there's also a couple of reasons why we did that, and it will become a little bit more clear as we go into it. But essentially, what we wanted to try and do is we wanted to try and create a good angle so that we could find, for example, the opposite side, number 10. We had a right-footed goalkeeper. So essentially, if we're taking a touch here, right foot, we have a nice little diagonal angle to skip the pressure into the other side, number six, other side, number 10, sorry. Um, but then we also had this moment now where actually we didn't mind being locked off so much. And then for us, it's about how can we create conditions to break through on the ball side. So essentially, what we might look to do is play up to a supporting right wing back, and then down to a number 10. And then how that looked in practice was obviously a little bit different. Sometimes we'd have 10 that was a little bit more over, a 6 that come out a little bit more, and we might be able to create the up back through with the number six. If we get really locked off, then what we're trying to do is just access the backspace or the back room, as it's called in Norwegian, with runners from striker, opposite side number 10, and then wing back on the other side as well. So we was quite direct in this phase of the game. Team's exceptional now at high pressing from a goal kick. It's a set piece. It's a dead ball. Teams are really well regimented in that now. We find so incredibly hard to be able to try and play through a press. So sometimes we might have to go over it or around it. And as we said, if we found the opposite side number 10 on a more of a direct ball, we still wanted threats going into the backspace from our wing backs and striker, but then we really looked at compacting the box here to make sure that we were able to win first and second contacts. And that was a really key thing. If we don't win the first contact, then we make sure that we win the second contact. Another alternative that we had is if we found that both number 10s were taken out and it wasn't so obvious that we could find them, then we want to look to try and hit the highest point. And it's a little bit more around if they came to us and it was a little bit more man for man pressure. A key principle that we'd had for the most of the season was that we hit the highest point, we get around it, compact, and we make sure we still have threats going in the other way as well. And then just to show you a couple of clips that we had from it, as you can see, our structure. If I just pause it here, the box is a little bit more like a diamond, but I don't actually mind this. It's a little bit more sort of emphasis on players thinking for themselves because we create a situation where we actually have a two versus one on this number six here for Rosenborg. If our number six is a little bit lower here, it doesn't really give us any advantage as much as it does, for example, if she comes a bit higher. And then here we're just trying to draw in a little bit of pressure, trying to make them come to press us. And then we open up a little bit of space on the side. And then this is the positive about having that plus one is that we're able to then be able to keep the ball, make them work after us as well. We lose the first contact here, but that's our opposite side, number six, winning the second contact. We win the third contact. And then this was just a key thing for us is just making sure that we win contacts and then break through when we can. On another day, potentially with a little bit more quality, perhaps we're in on goal and we have a scoring opportunity. But that was just a key thing there in terms of our structure, but also the importance of winning those first and second, third contacts. If it does come to the fact where you have to play a bit longer, which a lot of teams are starting to do now against the type of pressure that we're seeing in world football. We also analysed Rosenborg in a little bit more of a high block open play. Again, 4-3-3. They have that narrow front three here. They have a bit of a wider midfield three, and then their back four. So as we saw, it's similar characteristics throughout all of their phases, and it made it incredibly hard to try and break through into the middle of the field. What we did see though is that we saw that the back again, they're very happy to step out with a back into Lin is the other team here into their fullback slash wing back, and then it created a massive gap between their centre back and their back, which is tried to cover here, as you can see by the outside central midfield player. But as you can see by this point, if it's a one touch round the corner, this player for the other team is already on the wrong side of the midfielder here. So we'd show this, but again, a key principle that we had was actually, well, we want runs between widest defender. So yes, we've highlighted maybe a bit of a weakness, but it's also relevant to what we have tried to do for 9 months before we actually played this game. Not such great quality on the pass, but again, we're just highlighting where those spaces could open up and emphasizing maybe a little bit more. Can we have a little bit more quality in those moments, and perhaps we're through into that backspace and create a goal scoring opportunity. And then a little bit more of a mid block here. Is a little bit high in the field, perhaps for a mid block, but this was maybe the best clip that we could show. Again, the very active with the outside central midfield players, and what we highlighted is the fact that if we're going to go and switch the play, we have to have very clear intentions what we're doing, and we have to make shorter passes so that it makes it more harder for this player to be able to step out. And as you can see now, they're actually a front four. they're actually a front four, so Lynn actually lose their +1 here. So it makes it incredibly difficult now to get good quality on the turn of the game, especially when they're able to step out like so. So essentially, what we said was, okay, you're going to turn the game, make sure that we keep that +1. But if you're going to turn the game or switch the play, however you want to call it, clear intentions, shorter passes, and quicker tempo. And this was our classic structure, if you like. And then what we look to try and do again is use the goalkeeper to create that +1. So you're going to see it a lot now with Rosini at Chelsea. To be fair, we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Is having the goalkeeper involved to create that +1. A real key thing here in terms of structure is that we didn't want to. Firstly, the goalkeeper is a player, and they have. Of course, you have to have the right characteristics in your goalkeeper. But what we said was the fact that, well, if we can have the goalkeeper here, it means that we can still create a +1 higher up in the field as well. So essentially, what it might look like, for example, is if the goalkeeper was back towards a goal. Perhaps we'd have to drop a number six in if we wanted to create that +1. We might have to drop a number six out to create that +1. It could be that this player here is the side centre back comes in, wing back comes even lower, and then all of a sudden you're 4v4 or even potentially 3v4 on the back line. So that was a key thing. We have our +1 here with our wing backs, 10's striker, an opposite side wing back. Yeah, we have still that 5 versus 4 there, so we're still creating a +1. And then here with the sixes as well, this is probably the only area that we're maybe a little bit underloaded. But again, as you saw, if they step out with their outside midfielder, perhaps we still have a 2 versus 1 on their number six. One thing that we did change for this game, usually we want the number 10s to be quite high and then be able to drop in. What we said is that we wanted the number 10s to be essentially in the door, as we called it, between the outside central midfield players and then the number six who holds the middle of the field. A couple of reasons why is that it gives a little bit of a decision for the outside central midfielder. Do they step out to press? Do they hold that position? Okay, if they hold, then we give our side centre backs a little bit more time on the ball. If they step out, then we potentially have the opportunity to either play into a six, then into a 10, or straight into the 10. As you can see here, some of the options that we might come to from that. But again, if we played outside, as you saw, they're very happy for their back to step out. So then we was looking for like underlaps or runs between widest defender, as we called it. Or more often than that, more often than not, that would come from our ball side number 10. If we played in a 1-3-5-2, then that would probably come from the ball side striker. And then we also said that if we have a lower 10, it's a much bigger distance for the stopper, as it's called in Norwich, and the centre back to step out. And then we come to situations where perhaps we've made a breakthrough into a melon room, or in English, the pocket, or the space between the midfield and the defending line. And then what we really wanted now is to have active wing backs. So as soon as we're seeing that we're going to make that breakthrough, wing backs on both sides, we wanted up in the field. So then we're able to have those threats going into this backspace. If it wasn't on the ball side, then perhaps a quick turn of the game so we get the opposite side wing back into it as well. And then rest defense is something that we looked at a lot last year and was really important to us. So what we wanted is that we wanted our back three and our two number sixes to be the ones that held the balance of the team. So what we didn't want was the number sixes to go off on an underlap or an overlap. We wanted these two number sixes here, just to give us a little bit more balance. And some people might say that, well, that's a little bit negative, but ultimately 9 times out of 10, when you're attacking, you lose the ball. So essentially for us, it's about, can we give ourselves the best conditions to regain the ball and then restart the attack. And then another key thing here is when we was rest defending, the principle that we had is that we wanted to be zonal. So essentially, what we didn't want is the outside centre back to be so tight here. So then, if this ball gets cleared into these channels here, that this player has a run on the centre back. Where actually, if the ball's cleared here, then we give ourselves a little bit more space to step up to be aggressive here, or to be able to cover the space behind. So we was very sort of zone oriented in our rest defending. And then with that as well, we had an alternate. If we couldn't find good breakthroughs or we created some good conditions, then we wanted to go a little bit longer, diagonal into a 2v1 wide or even a 1v1 wide. If the 10 was lower and it was just, for example, a higher wing back versus their fullback. And then really important that we was compact after the long diagonal to win those second balls. So when we had, for example, patterns of play in training, we'd often look at what is a trigger, what is a signal. Okay, if we're coming back here now, by the time that this ball is moving to the goalkeeper, we're already starting to set up that long diagonal. And just a couple of clips here in terms of how it looked in open play. A real key thing here is that we hold the ball so that we make sure that we have the right structure to try and break through. We don't need to be impatient. And then as you can see now, their front three again holding the same characteristics, and then we create this +1 on this front three here. Our opposite side centre back is just a little bit out of picture now, but we do have that four versus three. We don't use that +1 as it would have been there, but we still give ourselves really okay conditions to be able to move the ball. And then, as I said, we wanted to be quite direct, pick up second balls, which was really important, compact in the box as we did now, and then come back out, and then we're looking at those long diagonals to give us the best possible chance of being able to break through on the other side. And then if I just stop that here now, we're actually at a point, yes, we win a corner, but actually we're overloading them in the box as well, which was also another key thing that we really looked at. We tried to overload. Here we had ball side number 10, opposite side number 10, and our striker. So we win a corner from that long diagonal, but if we're just a little bit more quality here in the 1v1, able to cross the ball, then we actually have an overload in that area of the field. Another example, even though it's quite high in the field, constantly trying to adjust positions. As you can see here, we get the goalkeeper involved, make them try to come and press us. And you can see some of the distances that we had. It's big distances for them to come and step out. So when we wanted to and when we didn't want to break through, we did have quite good control of the ball, force them into like a little bit of a mid block or a low block. And then if I'm just able to stop now as well, you can see that we have our sixes behind the first line of pressure, holding that middle of the field, ready to give us balance. And then our opposite side, number 10, is in the door. Probably would like her a little bit lower, but this is just a still picture. And then just able to show you there that if we was able to break through into here, then we give ourselves good conditions to then find the other side of the field. Having said that, though, as I said, Rosenborg are actually very good in how they defended for the majority of the season, to be honest. And then as you can see, even now, like the cover shadow of the wing to take out the passes into the six alongside the striker here, it made it very difficult to try and break through the middle of the field. And then we look to set up that long diagonal just to show you here, not super happy with in terms of we're not there on a second ball, but we still have good numbers in this sort of quarter of the field. So essentially, if we could just maybe be a little bit more aggressive here into the second ball, then we give ourselves really good conditions to try and counter press and win it back. And that was a really big thing for us as well. If we do go long and diagonal into a side, can we then look to get really good numbers on that ball side, start the counter press, regain the ball a lot closer to the goal? If we're able to regain it here, then we've made up 40 meters, and we're starting the attack, as I said, 40 meters further ahead than where we had it. And then just analysing them in a low block as well, which is what we showed the players. Again, same characteristics. They're 4-3-3, narrow front three, wide midfield three. Again, really aggressive out with their outside centre mid and also their back or their fullback, sorry. And then you can see the massive gap that they had again. And then just again for the players, just show that we want the runs through the widest defenders. So just to really visualize the areas that we want to try and get to. Ends up in a shot. So key points when we force them down into a little bit of a low, height and width in wide areas. We want to try and create 1v1 situations or even 2v2 situations wide, and then in legs, which is crosses into score box as and when we could. So we wanted to create a little bit more of a bridge between the middle centre back and the wing backs. So we looked at could we have maybe a little bit more of an aggressive side centre back to be able to create a nice bridge if we was able to turn the game. And as you can see here, that's what we want to try and do. We want to try and draw out we want to try and draw out the fullback to then try and access, if we could, what we called zone two, or essentially the half space. And that was a really key thing for us, is that, if we could, we didn't really want to cross the ball from here. So this is a pitch that we'd actually show the players, just to show the key sort of areas that we were trying to get to. And we really emphasize again those runs between widest defenders. Can we get the ball into zone two? And the reason why, as I'm sure many of you will know, is that if we're able to cross the ball from here rather than here, it's statistically a much higher chance of being able to score a goal. What might happen that we saw is potential for them to double up onto our wing backs. So then it was also really important that we had our side centre back that was able to get up into the field and support, and then we'd be able to potentially set the ball back, and then be able to cross the ball, hopefully to an overload with our opposite side wing back, and then ball side, opposite side tens, and the striker. So we gave a lot of license really for the centre backs on the ball side to get up into the field to support below, so we can potentially have across into this area now. And if I just take it back one slide as well, the position of the ball side number six was also really important. So if we was able to turn the game, we did it through the number six, and then able just to turn it with a little bit more speed, because we saw that they were very aggressive to step out on switches of the play. And then again, we're looking at our two number sixes to then give us balance when we saw that the ball was going to go into the box. And as we said, really compact behind the ball with our back three and two number sixes ready to take the second balls. And yeah, just to go on from that and show you a little bit in terms of transition principles. So again, like the transition principles, we wouldn't necessarily show transition clips of opposition unless we saw something quite interesting that we felt that we could use to our advantage. So for example, we had one game where we noticed that the left back for the other team inverts to be like a number 10. So then we actually showed that, but in this game we just kept it quite simple. So this is like an offensive transition principle that we have. Anything that's sort of in our first or second third, um, we looked to, and especially if it was a little bit more of a contested ball, and we'd come to situations where if we were playing a team that was also quite direct, we'd end up with the ball like this quite a lot of the times. And you also saw it a little bit in one of the clips where our number six tries to just clip the ball forward. So if we had a bouncing ball or it's under contested pressure, what we look to try and do is just work the ball out of that immediate counter press. And we look to target those wide areas where we asked our wing backs to anticipate a little bit. Okay, well, if we see that it's going to be contested in the middle of the field, then we knew where we wanted the ball to go, so we could afford to cheat a little bit onto the sides. So essentially, what we try to do is we like to try and get the wing backs behind the full backs into that space there, where we might be able to create a 1v1 opportunity, or potentially a chance for a pass into an underlap in number 10. Um, or if we didn't do that, we'd be able to set up a counter press opportunity quite high in the field, close to the opposition goal. And then this is what it would look like in terms of defensive transition on a principle. We split the field up really into around the ball and away from the ball. So essentially, around is all of like the first, second, third, fourth defenders. That's as I said, around the ball. And then what we'd be looking to do is we'd ask them to step on, is what we called it. Essentially, before the pass is being played, hold a compact position. So as you can see, for example, the side centre back here is not necessarily on the back of the 11 straight away, but holding a little bit more of a middle zone. And then as the ball travels, we ask them to arrive with the ball, and then make sure that you're there to put on pressure, win the ball, force them backwards, or make a foul in that moment. And then away from the ball, it was players either in the last line away from the ball or on the opposite side, plus the goalkeeper. We'd ask them to be quite zone oriented, so they're ready to cover the key spaces if the other team are able to skip that counter pressure. So yeah, something that we worked at quite a lot. We worked on sort of an offensive structure that was quite compact, so we give ourselves really good counter pressing conditions, and that was a big thing for us. So yeah, that's the presentation. As I said, this is what we showed the players. obviously giving you a little bit more insight into why we do things. So I would say that this presentation would take maybe 10 minutes at most to run through everything we need to. As I said, I think 80% is things that we worked on most weeks going into most games as part of our the offensive side of our game model, and as you can see now, the transitions as well. And then I think about 20% is adapting to the opposition. So essentially, as you saw, that we used the goalkeeper in that first line, and in terms of the goal kick, we also looked at our number tens to be a little bit lower in the door. We called it. So yeah, that's just a little bit of an example in terms of how we adapted a little bit for this game. So yeah, it just hopefully sparks a little bit of thought process into your own context about how you use analysis, how you might use game plans. Um, Look, different things work for different people. Some of you might think that this isn't the right thing to do in terms of showing loads of slides, and that's absolutely fine. Some of you might think that this is great. There is no right or wrong. It's just really how the players perceive that, and we found that players they'd been by the time that I'd got in there, and obviously I know like the assistant coach before me, they'd been used to seeing slides of a game plan. So essentially, we found that that's probably what worked best, something that they were used to. As I go forward, I'd like to use more sort of sort of video from matches, especially on the 80% of the times that we're looking at our game model, and not so much adapting. But just away from this, just to give you a little bit of a run through, really from the Thursday is when we started to build up into the match. So from the Thursday, we'd be doing 11v11, and then we'd really look at half of the session we'd split into offensive, and then half we'd split into defensive as well, and then we'd really look at those principles, and then any nuances or differences game to game is when we'd introduce it onto the Thursday into 11v11. And then with that as well, when we went into the Friday, as I said, like we would do the set piece analysis, and that'd be when we'd work on set pieces. But more often than not, we'd also take and we'd run through 11v0 shadow play, patterns of play, but whatever you want to call it, just to really sort of really highlight in an unopposed area of what we was looking at. And I found that I probably wouldn't do that with youth players, if that is your context. But we found that with senior players, it was just really good to just to activate really more than anything, but just to paint some pictures into minds as well. And then we'd go into the Saturday, and then important that the game plan here is um, maybe it works. More often than not, you have to change something into the game. So whenever I made a game plan, I would also think, well, firstly, how am I gonna beat this game plan? And then secondly, what am I gonna do if it doesn't work? So essentially, what it might be, and I think what we looked at was actually, okay, if we found that having our +1, it wasn't good enough, or the distances wasn't quite correct, perhaps we drop down the ball side wing back just to give us an extra outlet and try and create a bigger space between their fullback and centre back, just as an example. So it's always handy to think of when you have a game plan, okay, what adaptations can you make? What do you anticipate? How are you going to beat this game plan? So then you have a much clearer idea of some adaptations that you could make. So yeah, that was the presentation. Thank you for listening. I'm going to drop my social medias, my X, LinkedIn, email. If you've got any questions or you want to connect, please do feel free to reach out. I'm also looking for my next opportunity in football, so yeah, do feel free to reach out if you have any projects that you feel that this could be a good addition to. But yeah, thank you once again.